My name's Chris, and there's no Christy here on the Washing Up podcast. This is a special edition. I sort of told you all about this one in the last couple of weeks. Where I'm here with Steve Molk of TV Black Box. How are we going?
Good, Chris. I'm here to ruin everything.
Wonderful. We love it when people come to ruin things. It's what we're here for, really. It's about ruining the nation and ruining television. Let's talk Masterchef ratings. So the whole reason I got you on is to talk Masterchef ratings because there's been a lot of media talk this year about TV ratings, and in particular, from our point of view, Masterchef. Overall, how is it going? Just as a general picture before we get into it.
Look, ratings-wise, it's consistent with how the other programs in the time slot are going, which sounds immediately like a cop-out, but that's the reality of primetime TV ratings. The networks have burned every bridge that they have and are now leaning so heavily on their primetime, stripped reality content that there's kind of no room for anything else. And so audiences that don't want to watch that or aren't interested in people falling in love or renovating their house are running off to Stan, Amazon, Netflix, catch-up services, even their very own catch-up services to watch other things.
Yep. And I mean, it's interesting. I mean, we've always subscribed, and we've mentioned it a few times on the podcast. We've always subscribed to the idea that we want to see the Ed Cavalier, Tony Martin idea, F-list rowboat. Because we think that would be perfect. Just, a bunch of F-list celebrities in a rowboat, last one left wins.
We're overdue.
I think it's a good way to get rid of some of them. Like, we've got to get rid of some of them, and I think that's a good way to do it. But Masterchef, I think, is a fascinating study because a lot of people talk about the idea of the budget and the basically the draw of the name Masterchef. And I think a lot of people were really surprised when they saw the start of year ratings for it. I remember seeing some of those early ratings, and it was getting absolutely decimated. Now, a large part of that, I think we'll get to now, is things like Lego. So why was it just Lego that was killing it at the start?
Well, no, Married at First Sight has been the biggest show on TV this year, even beating Lego, but Lego was consistently good and only a really short run, which is what made it stand out.
Yeah.
Look, I think the thing for Masterchef, it's actually not down that bad. Like last season, I think it averaged somewhere in the early 800s.
Yeah. And
this season it's averaging, somewhere in the early 600s. Mid to late 600s, let's be fair.
Yeah.
Now, that 100,000 viewers is noticeable, though House Rules is down. And then a reasonable gap. The Voice is doing okay, but it's doing – you remember the old MasterChef model?
Yeah.
Be that the elimination on Sunday nights were the highest rating episodes.
Yeah.
And then as it trailed through the week, the ratings diminished, and then it would bounce up again on Sunday and then trail down again for the rest of the eps through the week.
Yeah.
The Voice is suffering that, even though there's only 2 or 3 eps a week now.
Which is, which I think we'll talk about the idea of burnout and concept burnout shortly, I think. But one of the things for me that was a bit of a surprise is that we know that when MasterChef moved, so that idea became, where they moved their eliminations, where they put the immunity pin in to try to get some interest, which personally, from what we've seen, I think
they've got a scavenger hunt episode coming up.
Oh, yeah. I don't think the immunity pin has had the resonance that they hoped it would have with the audience. I think that's actually had a bit more of a backlash from the audience from what we've seen and feedback we've seen. But I think the other interesting thing, I think, is that what MasterChef, in my mind, has tried to do is they've tried to throw a lot more big chefs at those weeks where they're worried about the ratings or worried about that dip in the middle of the week.
Yes.
And Nigella Week was fascinating because Nigella Week was, I think, from memory, one of the lower rating weeks they had. It got really badly smashed. Is that possibly the idea of that early format burnout of, as you said, we know we're going to be here a while?
We also got to put it in context as to when that was, right? That was like the second week of May.
Yep.
And I think we were really getting to the pointy end of Married at First Sight about then, weren't we?
I think it was either, I think it might have been just after the start of maybe week 1 of Lego or week 2 of Lego.
So we've got that overlap, right?
Yep.
Where it was a massive finale for maths, and then like an out-of-the-box surprise at how much people were into Lego Masters, not an episode dropped below 1 million viewers. So all of a sudden, people are straight away over there. Something has to suffer. And with House Rules, I think House Rules had kicked on by then. God,
House Rules was consistently, I think, outstripping MasterChef and just not getting huge numbers, but it was outstripping MasterChef. I remember.
But let's also put House Rules as air quotes success into context. 7 have been pouring promo money into that show since My Kitchen Rules, like its 10th anniversary season, fell on its ass.
Yep. I think it's something that we've sort of found really just intriguing about the general way that the series is operated in terms of with MasterChef is understandably we sort of expect that the ratings would be down probably a little bit. What we've also seen, I think, in recent weeks though, is I think we were saying before, there's been a bit of a bump, and we referred to it, I think, on the podcast jokingly as the Maggie Beer bump.
Yeah.
Because the Maggie Beer episode, I think, was the highest rated episode of the series up to that point.
Yeah.
Is MasterChef, and we talked about a bit about format burnout, and we'll do a bit more of that in a second, is MasterChef becoming more and more the show that basically everyone knows that 24 people start and they wait until we get down to about 10 and then everyone tunes back in?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting beast, isn't it? Because I have in the past been obsessed with MasterChef, and through a few things, but not least of which that I looked at 24 people and went, yeah, call me when there's like I can remember all of your names.
Yeah.
And that's a tough play. MasterChef is also running 5 nights a week, which is the biggest commitment of all the reality shows at the moment.
I'll tell us. We bumped our podcast back from 3 nights to 2 nights because burnout is real.
Yeah, it's punishing if you're going to create content. I remember back in the day I was pumping out recaps of every episode. And I just couldn't keep up 5 nights a week this year. I would be dead. But also it's a little bit endemic of 10's position in the network wars. So 10 is a distant 4th as it stands ratings-wise this year. And we can't blame that on MasterChef, nor can we directly say it's MasterChef's fault that that's the case. It's the 10 brand is struggling. And even more so since, before CBS picked it up when it was in receivership. And there's going to need to be some work for 10 to turn that around. And I think that 2020 is their opportunity. They're really committed to a lot of stuff already this year. If people aren't going to buy in, like turning a TV network around is like turning a large ocean liner. It doesn't happen quickly.
And 10 in its history has done a number of these pirouettes and turns. And
yeah, that's right. People are well aware that 10's got the stench of death on it.
Yep.
And it's the 11th season of MasterChef. Now, I don't mean to suggest that the quality is down. Actually, of the shows that I've watched, I've really enjoyed it. I think that there are parts of it that are looking fresher than ever. However, it's the 11th season. There are, apart from Survivor, which it went through a funk in its probably, sort of teens around the series that it needed to reinvent itself, and that didn't work and those sorts of things.
Well, it swapped networks.
I mean the American Survivor.
Yeah.
It's on season 39, I think, now.
I've lost track with Survivor. I lost track.
But it went through a whole period where it was like, well, that just wasn't the best season of Survivor. But then they went, well, let's do this. And I know that MasterChef has already done that.
Yeah.
Is it in a position to do it again? I don't know. Do we need to sort of pat it on the bum and say, great work, that'll do, pig, and let it rest?
Well, this is the sort of part of my follow-up. There's 2 parts to this that I want to sort of talk about with you, which one of them will be some of the changes. But I want to I'll jump ahead because that's where we are in the conversation. How much is this all being driven by the fact that they're selling to India and the UK, and especially India, which they've opened up in the last 2 years? And it's becoming kind of like almost like you could pat it and go, that'll do, pig, that'll do. But now India's open.
Well, without being overly cynical, you tell me from the casting.
Yep.
I mean, to their great credit, and MasterChef has always been like this. It's always represented the full diversity of Australia.
Exactly.
If not even the people getting into the top 24, the people that were auditioning. We got to see heaps of people rock up and make their, native dishes or the things that their grandmother made them and taught them, and it's not written down, and all of those amazing things.
Yep.
When Look, and you'd be a bit of a silly producer not to recognise that, hey, this is rating its absolute pants off in India, so we should not completely change the format, but start to tip our hat in ways that allows an Indian audience to connect in more deeply.
Yep. And I mean, look, it makes sense from a rating standpoint, and I think that part of the and that is not just before anyone goes, oh, so you're saying that it's nothing to do with contestants winning or anything like that. It's about
no, that's right.
It's always about, and that's what I'm saying. It's not about that at all. What we're saying is it's the idea of, first of all, showing diversity, which is what MasterChef's had as a strength,
yes,
and always had as a strength. But also having some challenges that are more open to audiences, like doing more things that don't necessarily involve beef, doing things that involve things that maybe other audiences can engage with. I think that's been quite clever, and I think the way they've done some of that has been quite clever. But I think that, for one of our views on this was that idea of once you open up those overseas markets, even if a show feels like maybe you want to rest it for a bit, it's got to be very hard, especially with the position that Ten's in. Very hard to go, nope, not doing that.
Well, Ten's immediate problem, if they were to rest MasterChef, is what fills that gap.
Yep.
I mean, MasterChef is reliable. It is delivering to 10 reliably some of its highest ratings across primetime. So, of course, you want to keep that, 5 nights a week. Of course, you want to keep rolling that out. Because if we don't put MasterChef in there, what goes in 5 nights a week at 7:30? 10 have the realist problem. We've talked about this, the realist. How good is my English?
Oh, that's great.
We've been talking about this on the TV Black Box podcast for a fair chunk of the year. Yeah. 10's biggest problem is that they have not been delivering new formats. Yeah. They have been delivering heritage brands and those sorts of things, but even they haven't stuck. Changing Rooms was a debacle for them and will remain so even when they drop the rest of the season. The risk of a big new format, Chris, is that it could absolutely go gangbusters and turn everything around for them.
Yep.
Or it could be, as the Super Switch has been for 7, a very expensive kick in the nads.
I still see promos for that, and I'm amazed. But
it's still on.
That's what I said. I'm still amazed. A, I'm amazed it's still on, and B, I'm amazed at the level of promos I've seen for the Super Switch. But I think that, so one of the things I think they did try to do, and we've given them a lot of credit on the podcast for at least trying to freshen elements of it up.
Yes.
So the idea of, for example, replacing Shannon Bennett with having 3 mentors come in and have them be past contestants or past winners in the case of Billy, and having Poe, Billy, Matt Sinclair.
Well, you'd be crazy not to lean on what is now a growing pool of successful MasterChef contestants, let alone the champions, right?
Yeah, and again, bringing back people like, and again, we're a bit partial because we love a bit of Elena Duggan coming back for a challenge. And all those sorts of people coming back in and sort of mentoring and doing that. Part of the thing, though, I think that you hear a lot from audiences is that while the hosts are the brand and the judges are the brand and the judges have been dependable,
yes,
they're tired. And I think that's one of the things we hear is that, like, Gary, Matt and George, there are elements that are quite reliable and quite brand worthy, and there are other elements where the audience is kind of like they seem a little tired and like they're going through motions a little bit. And as you said, 11 seasons. Do you think there's any potential move in there in terms of either not replacing them necessarily, but like maybe rotating people in and out, or do you think those 3 are the 3 come hell or high water?
Yeah, it would be critical to the show's success if you got rid of George, Gary or Matt.
Yep.
They are now so intrinsically linked to the MasterChef brand that it would be the iSnack 2.0 of MasterChefs.
Yep. Which again, you don't need that. No one needs that in their life. Where I think they might be able to do something on this is maybe take a little bit more of the emphasis off them, possibly in some of these challenges, and do a bit more of things like and again, we come obviously from a bake-off hub,
sure,
to do MasterChef, and it's always even though we do more MasterChef podcasts than we do bake-off podcasts, that's simply volume. Things like the blind taste testing and the blind judging and things like that. and doing a bit more of that rather than what sometimes seems a bit like a creation of narrative. Do you think that's something that maybe as a point for the show might be something they could look at in terms of not making it so much about, for the first couple of weeks on the show, for example, it's usually about, we know that Gary likes this. We know that George likes this. We know Matt likes this. So they make the same dishes over and over again.
Yeah.
So maybe blind taste testing and things like that.
Yeah, the challenge is whenever they've done blind taste testing, whenever they do it in the season, they drag it out in the worst bloody way. We don't need the judging to take 35 minutes.
Yeah.
So it would be good to do that. You're right. Definitely. I mean, 11 seasons in, if you're going to attempt MasterChef as a contestant and you haven't done your homework to know that this is what the judges like, you're an idiot.
Yeah, exactly.
You've got to play to that.
If you know that you can make crackling in the first 3 weeks and Gary is going to put you through, you make crackling.
Yeah, that's right. Like, stick your neck out. Do what you can. If there's the opportunity for you to pull out a Crockenbush just when you've got the chance.
Yeah, what did you do in the 60 minutes? I whipped up a Crockenbush.
Yeah, just casually.
We've seen some cool ideas. We talked about it with friend of the show, Robert Harwood from Australian Bake Off. And we talked about this. We did a podcast over New Year where we talked about things we'd like to see. And one of the things we talked about was, and it was a problem with the challenge they did last night where they did the Loon croissant, which was they didn't actually make the dough because that's a special dough recipe. So they got given a dough.
Controversial.
I know. They got given a dough to roll, and I may have had a bit of a rant on a podcast last night about that, which was fun. But one of the things we said was we liked that idea of an overnight cook, but the problem with that was it wasn't either accessible in terms of something you could do at home, nor was it really something technically overboard because you didn't have to make the dough. It was sort of a middle ground nothingness of the challenge. We suggested for a 24-hour thing something like a slow cooker. And start one, and maybe rather than these small episodes where they keep completely to formula, doing a 2 or 3 day challenge where they do something which is slow cooked and long prepared.
I mean, there's also the opportunity, and I'd say this knowing not what is coming.
Yeah.
It's always risky when you go in on the food trend of the week or the year or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But in line with the slow cooker scenario, right? Low and slow cooking has become more than just a fad. Like, that's a thing. So let's actually get in there and give them a bit of brisket and say, go for your life. We'll find out how you went tomorrow or, in 12 or 16 hours time. Yeah,
that's something that what we want to see is and this is always an argument among the audience where you've got people saying they should be able to make their cultural heritage dishes all the way through, and that should be something. One of the things we always talk about is you want to see growth. And you want to see technique and you want to see skills. And one of the problems, sort of, the feedback we get from people is that because that format has become so locked and rigid, people don't get the chance to show technique. Because, everyone goes, well, why are there, for this year, for example, it's been parfaits, it's been ice creams. This year it's panna cotta. And it's why there's so many panna cottas. And the answer is because you can do a panna cotta in the 60 minutes, and once you've done one, you know how to do them off by heart.
Yeah.
It's easy. And you're not going to fall. You want to just be in what we refer to as the montage of mediocrity right through until the last couple of episodes.
Yes.
Because then you're not a target for anyone.
Oh, absolutely. If you can stay somewhere in the middle of the pack till you get through to like the final 4, that's ideal.
If people don't know your name by the time you're in the top 12 and you're still in the top 12, you're probably doing it right. If people suddenly go, who's that person sitting there? You've probably got the montage of mediocrity correct.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to be the one that everyone knows who you are because you've been in front of the judges in the bottom 3 or 3 times, but you've managed to cook your way back.
Yeah,
I don't think we've had someone that's been regularly in the bottom 3 that's made the final 3.
No, exactly. And I mean, like in her series, Elena Duggan sort of emerged about halfway through, where they started suddenly going, oh, that's right, you can cook things. And it was about halfway through that they realised that she was there. The Diana Chan, Ben Ungerman was the same sort of thing.
It's also the nature of how they house them, right? The opportunity to not just be, cooking against each other and then in challenges when you have to work together. It's everyone's sitting around helping each other cook and prepare, and they're all, when they get the chance, just reading books and cooking stuff and talking about food. And like it's school band camp on acid.
Well, one of the things I was actually going to mention before we get towards the end here is how much of an impact, because it's not really talked about. How much of an impact do you think the house is on how the show goes? I feel like it plays a bigger role than people think.
Yeah, well, it can't not. That's where they have their, apart from the very dodgy sort of, pop-up tent thing that they get to sit in or attempted green room, when they're not filming or they're waiting for cleanup or the rest of it.
Yeah.
That's where they get to relax. That's where they get to talk about stuff. And you would be a psychopath to be in it. Let's say you made the top 24 and then made it through to the top 10.
Yeah.
If you had kept up any kind of game playing motive in that time, and I'm not going to talk to them or tell them or show them, I'm going to cook in private and all of the rest of it.
Yeah.
Like, really? Like, you hear them talk about it. Oh, that's right. Such and such has been practicing this a lot.
Yeah.
They see it. They get to eat it. So I think it's critical, particularly for the ones that make the top 12. They're the ones that are just in there all the time, invested, and being nice to their housemates and listening to them and talking about ideas, because it's in that they go, oh, I never thought to do this, or someone's going to drop, oh, no, I've found a great way to do this, and you blah, blah, blah. And that's actually going to help me. It's going to shave like actual minutes off.
It goes a long way.
Yeah.
So sort of my last question on this whole ratings idea is, Channel 10 brings you up and goes, all right, we've got MasterChef. What will you do to it to make it work in a more effective way?
Oh, God.
Because my first thing is cut it in half.
Look, it could be sharper in the edit. It could be shorter. We don't need, regular 85, 90-minute episodes.
I get sick of seeing the exploding MasterChef logo after a while.
Mate, that little sucker hides away in all sorts of places, doesn't he?
Oh, doesn't it?
It would be, like, even the 5-episode weeks when then there's a masterclass after it.
Yep.
That's 6, 7, 8 hours of MasterChef a week. That's huge.
Well, the one thing I like that they did this year, the mistake I will maintain that last year they lost everybody in the first week when they went so long on, I think it was the 4th episode or the last episode of that week, where they did a extra long challenge that went for 2.5 hours and then did a masterclass on top of it. And so in the first week, by the end of that first week, they did an episode that was about almost 4 hours, and they burnt the entire audience in the first week. And I don't think a lot of people didn't bounce back from the first episode, that first week, because they went so long on every episode. One of the things I think that has been a benefit this year from Channel 10 is because they've been promoting all these new shows, like 5 Bedrooms and those sorts of things. Mm-hmm. They've kept the episodes short.
Well, Wednesdays had to be.
Yeah.
Tuesdays has been allowed to move a little bit. Mondays can't, particularly with Have You Been Paying Attention Back. But Sunday is wide open. Yep. Thursday night is MasterChef night.
Yeah.
So you can have 11 hours of MasterChef programming in there. I do also want to offer that part of the reason why it's still on 11 seasons later, reliably and rating, great for 10, but could be better, is because of it's a brand in the market that is hitting notes that My Kitchen Rules isn't.
Yep.
And it's a long-term relationship with advertisers that have their products inserted, sometimes subtly, sometimes not.
I don't know what your Cole's talking about, Cole.
But that relationship is one to be cultivated and is worth a lot of money, because otherwise you'd say, well, they'd stop it because it costs too much money. Correct. If they had to fund the MasterChef budget against these ratings and lean only on advertising to pay for it, it would have finished seasons ago.
Yeah.
It's that integration and relationship with the key advertising partners that from back when it was shareholders' point of view and now, they're overlords at CBS, their point of view, it's a profitable program because it maintains this and still does pretty good numbers.
Yeah. And again, it's a show that I think, there's a lot still to love about it.
Oh, it is. In the reality genre, it stands out because even at auditions, definitely at top 24 and absolutely in top 12, there's no bad guys. There's idiots. There's dicks that, injure themselves, or you're watching the car accident unfold in front of you. You shouldn't be cooking that. What are you doing? Those two flavors don't go together, etc.
Yeah.
But everybody is on board. Everybody's on everybody's team. When they're standing up, shouting down maybe think that again. They're invested because they want to see everybody win.
Yeah, and again, I think the investment is what keeps that we know the hardcore audience coming back, even when they've got a lot to complain about. It is that investment.
Nice.
Yeah, it's what keeps the audience sort of coming back. Thanks a lot for coming on and talking to us about this, Steve. It's been a real pleasure, as always, to get to chat to you.
Thank you, mate.
We haven't got to chat to you since the short-lived podcast about Survivor. So we gave up there. So thank you for having a chat again, Steve. It's always wonderful. Anything you want to plug, go ahead.
Oh, the best thing you can do is if you want another podcast to listen to, grab TV Black Box in your iTunes podcast feeds. And, of course, read all about it at tvblackbox.com.au.
Recommended listening and recommended reading there. I can highly, highly recommend both of those. Thanks again, Steve, and we will catch you all later.
Cheers, mate.